The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. When I was in middle school, we didn't have Google or Wikipedia, but if you looked up awkward adolescent in the Encyclopedia Britannica, you just might have seen my picture. So when I got to high school, I decided it was time to make some changes. It was time to stand out in good ways. So I took that tried and true fast track to popularity marching band. Well, stereotypes aside, marching band was kind of cool in my school, but I think I signed up for it mostly to get out of gym class. I was not a particularly good musician. I struggled to read music, but I could follow a beat, and so I tried my hand at percussion. And as it turned out, I loved marching band with all its pageantry and camaraderie. And in my world of high school, along with theater and academic contests like current issues and events, I lived for marching band. Yes, I was a bit of a nerd as a kid. Or, wait, maybe I still am? Anyway, being the little overachiever that I was, even though I was not a particularly good musician, I saw myself as a leader, and I was determined that I was going to climb the top of the ranks and become the drum major. I wanted to be at the front of the field, the whole band following my conducting, the marching formations moving with my hands. So at the end of my sophomore year of high school, I tried out, and I lost. But the next year, I tried again, and I won. Well, at least the second spot. I was to be the assistant drum major of the marching Black Cat Band. I finally had a place at the side of glory. In today's reading, James and John have a little request for Jesus. Like many of Jesus' followers and many others in Palestine, they hoped for an end to the occupation of their land. They hoped for a Messiah to unite the Jewish people and overthrow the occupying army. They thought Jesus would be that kind of Messiah, that kind of king. And when he would take his throne to rule over a victorious Israel, they wanted to be right there beside him. So in anticipation of the day when he would establish his kingdom, James and John asked him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory." They did not understand what kind of king Jesus would be. And so Jesus tells them that in the world, rulers act like gods. They lord it over the people, and the great ones are tyrants. He tells them that his kingdom will be different. But it is not so among you, he says, but whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant. Martin Luther King Jr. preached a great sermon about this story 2 months before his death. He said about James and John's power play, "Now, very quickly, we would automatically condemn James and John, and we would say they were selfish. Why would they make such a selfish request? But before we condemn them too quickly, let us look calmly and honestly at ourselves, and we will discover that we too have these same basic desires for recognition, for importance, that same desire for attention, that same desire to be first." Of course, the other disciples got mad with James and John, and you can understand why. But we must understand that we have some of the same James and John qualities. And there is, deep down inside all of us, an instinct. It's a kind of drum major instinct, a desire to be out front, a desire to lead the parade, a desire to be first. And it is something that runs the whole gamut of life. Back to 1999, with the marching Black Cat Band and its brand new assistant drum major, me. I won my spot that spring, and in August, after drum major camp, yes, that's a thing, we came back for band two-a-days. If you're more familiar with the football version of this two-a-days, You might not know that, like the team that it supports with its music, some marching bands also practice for hours and during the hottest days of the year. It's where you learn the marching drills for the fall and practice moving to the music. As a senior and as a drum major, it was my job to help other members of the band, especially younger ones, to learn the footwork and choreography that our director was teaching us. During one practice, a particular freshman kept messing up. And finally, in frustration, I yelled at him, "Why are you being so stupid?" And I could immediately see the hurt in his face, and I was ashamed of myself. I'd given in too much to that drum major instinct that Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of, the desire to be out front, to lead the parade, and to be first, without thinking about how others felt. I was so focused on achieving the perfect formations to make the band look good and to make me, as one of its leaders, look good, that I missed out on the most important thing. Band is supposed to be fun. And it was my job as a drum major to mentor new band members, not to make them feel bad about themselves when they didn't immediately succeed. In my drive to be great, I'd failed to be a real leader. Not that aiming for success is a bad thing. In his drum major sermon, Dr. King said, we should not necessarily deny our drive for success, but instead rethink what we mean by greatness. He envisioned his funeral, which, as it turned out, happened far too soon after that sermon. He said, I'd like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. I'd like for somebody to say that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to say that day that I tried to be right on the war question. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. And I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who are naked. I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who are in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity. This realignment of greatness is one of the most central teachings of Jesus. It's what led the rulers and establishment of the first century to say of the early church, these people who've been turning the world upside down have come here also. Jesus reversed things, turned them around and upside down, and transformed them. His church, at its best, has followed in his lead. The old order said, might makes right. But Jesus taught that real power comes from vulnerability and weakness. As the great hymn from Philippians says, he emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. Jesus came among us as a lowly tradesperson to speak truth to power and weak alike, to serve all, and to give his life for the sake of the world. God became human, that humans might become godlike. When I, back at age 17, realized that I'd failed as a leader of my high school band by insulting and hurting the feelings and self-confidence of a younger student, I was deeply ashamed, and I apologized sincerely to my bandmate and to those around who'd heard me. That moment has stayed with me my whole life, and it's changed me. Now, as a leader, I try to make sure everyone feels valued and included. I try to make a space for everyone to feel comfortable speaking up. I've learned that leadership is not about dominating a space or a conversation so that I can be in the spotlight, but about empowering everyone to feel that they can be a valued and contributing member of the community. Over the years, I've learned that true leadership means serving. And I hope to be true to my values, and if I'm ever not, I hope that you'll let me know. In the church, we call this type of leadership servant leadership. And Christ calls the church to lead by serving the world. As our stewardship season hymn says, longing for peace, our world is troubled, longing for hope, many despair. Your word alone has power to save us. Make us your living voice. Christ be our light. Shine in our hearts. Shine through the darkness. Christ be our light. Shine in your church gathered today. I pray that we will achieve greatness, not to be showered with accolades and to sit at the right hand of glory, but that we may seek greatness by serving. To paraphrase Dr. King, I hope that when people speak of Christians and Trinity Church, they will say that we tried to spend our lives serving others, that we tried to love those who came our way, that we sought to be peacemakers, that we tried to feed those who hunger, that we tried to provide clothing to those without, and that we tried to shelter those without homes, that we did our best to seek justice and reconciliation for prisoners and victims of violence and crime and oppression alike, that we tried to learn, that we tried to love, that we tried to serve all of humanity, all of God's children. Amen.